everybody. Welcome to day 14 in Carrie's Corner, where we continue Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid. And we are starting in the chapter when Toad is finding further ways to get back home. Okay. The gypsy grumbled and declared if he did a few more deals of that sort, he'd be ruined. But in the end, he lugged a dirty canvas bag out of the depths of his trouser pocket and counted out 6 shillings and 6 pence into Toad's paw. Then he disappeared into the caravan for an instant and returned with a large iron plate, a knife, fork, and spoon. He tilted up the pot, and a glorious stream of hot, rich stew gurgled into the plate. It was indeed the most beautiful stew in the world, being made of partridges and pheasants and chickens and hares and rabbits and peahens and guinea fowls and 1 or 2 other things. Toad took the plate on his lap, almost crying, and stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and kept asking for more, and the gypsy never grudged it him. He thought that he had never eaten so good a breakfast in all his life. When Toad had taken as much stew on board as he thought he could possibly hold, he got up and said goodbye to the gypsy, and took an affectionate farewell of the horse and the gypsy, who knew the riverside well, gave him directions which way to go, and he set forth on his travels again in the best possible spirits. He was indeed a very different Toad from the animal of an hour ago. The sun was shining brightly. His wet clothes were quite dry again. He had money in his pockets once more. He was nearing home and friends in safety, and most and best of all, he had had a substantial meal, hot and nourishing, and felt big and strong and careless and self-confident. As he tramped along gaily, he thought of his adventures and escapes, and how when things seemed at their worst, he had always managed to find a way out. And his pride and conceit began to swell within him. "Ho, ho!" he said to himself, as he marched along with his chin in the air. "What a clever Toad I am! There is surely no animal equal to me for cleverness in the whole world. My enemies shut me up in prison, encircled by sentries, watched night and day by warders. I walk out through them all by sheer ability and courage. They pursue me with engines and policemen and revolvers. I snap my fingers at them and vanish, laughing into space. I am unfortunately thrown into a canal by a woman, fat of body and very evil-minded. What of it? I swim ashore. I seize her horse. I ride off in triumph, and I sell the horse for a whole pocketful of money and an excellent breakfast. Ho! I am the Toad, the handsome, the popular, the successful Toad." He got so puffed up with conceit that he made up a song as he walked in praise of himself, and sang it at the top of his voice, though there was no one to hear it but him. It was perhaps the most conceited song that any animal ever composed. "The world has held great heroes, as history books have showed, but never a name to go down to fame compared with that of Toad. The clever men at Oxford know all that there is to be knowed, but they none of them know 1/2 as much as intelligent Mr. Toad." The animals sat in the ark and cried, their tears in torrents flowed. Who was it said, "There's land ahead," encouraging Mr. Toad? The army all saluted as they marched along the road. Was it the king or Kitchener? No, it was Mr. Toad. The queen and her ladies in waiting sat at the window and sewed. She cried, "Look, who's that handsome man?" They answered, "Mr. Toad." He sang as he walked, and he walked as he sang, and got more inflated every minute, but his pride was shortly to have a severe fall. After some miles of country lanes, he reached the high road, and as he turned into it and glanced along its white length, he saw approaching him a speck that turned into a dot, and then into a blob, and then into something very familiar, and a double note of warning, only too well known, fell on his delighted ear. "This is something like," said the excited Toad. "This is real life again. This is once more the great world from which I have been missed so long. I will hail them my brothers of the wheel and pitch them a yarn of the sort that has been so successful up to now, and they will give me a lift, of course, and then I will talk to them some more, and perhaps, with luck, it may even end in my driving up to Toad Hall." Look at him, he's all conceited and full of himself there. Probably not a good thing to be. Driving up to Toad Hall in a motor car, this will be an eye for the badger. He stepped confidently out onto the road to hail the motor car, which came along at an easy pace, slowing down as it neared the lane, when suddenly he became very pale. His heart turned to water, his knees shook, and he doubled up and collapsed with a sickening pain in his insides. And well he might, the unhappy animal, for the approaching car was the very one he had stolen out of the yard of the Red Lion Hotel on that fatal day when all his troubles began. And the people in it were the very same people he had sat and watched at lunch in the coffee room. He sank down in his shabby, miserable heap in the road, murmuring to himself in his despair, "It's all up, it's all over, chains and policemen again, prison again, dry bread and water again. Oh, what a fool I have been. What did I want to go strutting about the country for, singing conceited songs and hailing people in the broad daylight on the high road instead of hiding till nightfall and slipping on quietly by back ways? Oh, hapless Toad, oh, ill-fated animal." The terrible motor car drew slowly nearer and nearer, till at last he heard it stop just short of him. Two gentlemen got out and walked round the trembling heap of crumbled misery lying in the road, and one of them said, "Oh dear, this is very sad. Here is a poor old thing, a washerwoman apparently, who has fainted in the road. Perhaps she's overcome by the heat, poor creature, or possibly she has not had any food today. Let us lift her into the car and take her to the nearest village, where doubtless she has friends." They tenderly lifted Toad into the motor car and propped him up with soft cushions and went on their way. When Toad heard them talk in so kind and sympathetic a manner, he knew that he was not recognized. His courage began to revive, and he cautiously opened first one eye, then the other. "Look," said one of the gentlemen, "she's better already. The fresh air is doing her good. How do you feel now, ma'am?" "Thank you kindly, sir," said Toad in a feeble voice. "I'm feeling a great deal better." "That's right," said the gentleman. "Now, keep quite still, and above all, don't try to talk." "I won't," said Toad. "I was only thinking if I might sit on the front seat there, beside the driver, where I could get the fresh air full on my face. I should soon be all right again." "What a very sensible woman," said the gentleman. "Of course you shall." So they carefully helped Toad into the front seat beside the driver, and on they went once more. Toad was almost himself again by now. He sat up, looked about him, and tried to be calm. "It's a fate," he said to himself. "Why strive? Why struggle?" And he turned to the driver at his side. "Please, sir," he said, "I wish you'd kindly let me try and drive the car for a little. I've been watching you carefully, and it looks so easy and so interesting, and I should like to be able to tell my friends that once I had driven a motor car." The driver laughed at the proposal so heartily that the gentleman asked what the matter was. When he heard, he said to Toad's delight, "Bravo, ma'am! I like your spirit. Let her have a try and look after her. She won't do any harm." Toad eagerly scrambled into the driver's seat, took the steering wheel in his hands, listened with affected humility to the instructions given him, and very slowly and carefully he set the motor car in motion. The gentlemen behind clapped their hands and applauded, and Toad heard them saying, "How well she does it! Fancy a washerwoman driving a car as well as that the first time." Toad went a little faster, then faster still, and faster. He heard the gentleman call out warningly, "Be careful, washerwoman." This annoyed him, and he began to lose his head. The driver tried to interfere, but he pinned him down in his seat with one elbow and put on full speed. The rush of air in his face, the hum of the engine, and the light jump of the car beneath him made him very excited. "Washerwoman indeed," he shouted recklessly. "Ho, ho, ho, I am the Toad, the motor car snatcher, the prison breaker, the Toad who always escapes. Sit still and you shall know what driving really is, for you are in the hands of the famous, the skillful, the entirely fearless Toad." With a cry of horror, the whole party rose and flung themselves on him. "Seize him," they cried. "Seize the Toad, the wicked animal who stole our motor car. Bind him, chain him, drag him to the nearest police station. Down with the desperate and dangerous Toad. Here's pictures of him being all innocent. And then I think he goes a little crazy. Alas, they should have thought. They should have remembered to stop the motor car somehow before playing any pranks of that sort. With a half turn of the wheel, the Toad sent the car crashing through the low hedge that ran along the roadside. One mighty bound, a violent shock, and the wheels of the car were churning up the thick mud of a horse pond. Toad found himself flying through the air with a strong upward rush and a delicate curve of a swallow. He liked the motion and was just beginning to wonder whether it would go on when he landed on his back with a thump in the soft, rich grass of a meadow. Sitting up, he could just see the motor car in the pond, nearly submerged. The gentleman and the driver, weighed down by their long coats, were floundering helplessly in the water. He picked himself up rapidly and set off running across the country as hard as he could, scrambling through hedges, jumping ditches, pounding across fields, till he was breathless and weary and had to settle down into an easy walk. When he had recovered his breath somewhat and was able to think calmly, he began to giggle, and from giggling he took to laughing, and he laughed till he had to sit down under a hedge. "Oh," he cried, "Toad again! Toad as usual comes out on the top. Who was it that got them to give him a lift? Who managed to get in the front seat for the sake of fresh air? Who persuaded them into letting him see if he could drive? Who landed them all in a horse pond? Who escaped, flying gaily and unhurt through the air, leaving all of them in the mud where they should rightly be? Why, Toad, of course. Clever Toad, great Toad, good Toad." Then he burst into song again and chanted with uplifted voice, "The motor car went boop, boop, boop as it raced along the road. Who was it steered it into pond? Ingenious Mr. Toad. Oh, how clever I am, how clever, how clever, how very clever." A slight noise at a distance behind him made him turn his head and look. Oh, horror. Oh, misery. Oh, despair. There he is running from the car. The scene of the accident. Not a good thing to do. About 2 fields off, a chauffeur in his leather gaiters and 2 large rural policemen were visible, running towards him as hard as they could go. Poor Toad sprang to his feet and pelted away again, his heart in his mouth. "Oh my," he gasped as he panted along. "What a fool I am! What a conceited and heedless fool! Swaggering again, shouting and singing songs again, sitting still and gossing again. Oh my, oh my, oh my!" He glanced back and saw to his dismay that they were gaining on him. On he ran desperately, but kept looking back and saw that they still gained steadily. He did his best, but he was a fat animal and his legs were short, and still they gained. He could hear them close behind him now, ceasing to heed where he was going. He struggled on blindly and wildly, looking back over his shoulder at the now triumphant enemy, when suddenly the earth failed under his feet. He grasped at the air and splash! He found himself head over ears in deep water, rapid water, water that bore him along with a force he could not contend with, and he knew that in his blind panic he had run straight into the river. He rose to the surface and tried to grasp the reeds and the rushes that grew along the water's edge close under the bank, but the stream was so strong that it tore them out of his hands. "Oh my!" gasped poor Toad. "If I ever steal a motor car again, if I ever sing another conceited song." Then down he went and came up breathless and spluttering. Presently he saw that he was approaching a big dark hole in the bank, just above his head, and as the stream bore him past, he reached up with a paw and caught hold of the edge and held on. Then slowly and with difficulty he drew himself up out of the water, till at last he was able to rest his elbows on the edge of the hole. There he remained for some minutes, puffing and panting, for he was quite exhausted. As he sighed and blew and stared before him into the dark hole, some bright small thing shone and twinkled in its depths, moving toward him. As it approached, a face grew up gradually around it, and it was a familiar face, brown and small with whiskers, grave and round with neat ears and silky hair. It was the water rat. And that brings us to the end of this chapter and today's reading. We will start in chapter 9 of The Wind and the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Have a great weekend. Hope you do some fun things and some creative things, and you either maybe make up a story or draw a picture or read a story out loud or have some fun and also play some games and relax. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Bye! See you on Monday for more of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid. Have a great weekend.